The IE600 was a fantastic IEM, but it was a bit pricey and some people wanted less treble. Enter the new contender, the Sennheiser IE200. Let's talk about it. Hey, I'm DMS, you're watching the Headphone Show, and it just started raining outside. This is Sennheiser's latest addition to the IE lineup. For example, the IE100, 300, 600, and 900. The 200, well, it comes in at $149, has the ability to be tuned in two different ways, and in some ways it's actually an improvement over the considerably more expensive IE600. Let's start off with build and comfort. The shape of the shell, well, it should be familiar if you've seen the other IEMs in this lineup. The only real difference is this one is plastic and the vent is moved to a different location. We still have the same collared MMCX connector, which has its upsides and downsides. The upside being that the collar protects it from being bent. The downside is that, well, you can't really plug in a third-party MMCX connector unless it can fit around the collar. This does mean the cables are interchangeable between the IE200, 300, 600, and 900, and as warranty voiding as it may be, I actually snipped the collar off of my IE600. This is an extremely small and light IEM. Its footprint in the ear can accommodate even some of the smallest canals out there, and I think that Sennheiser definitely nailed the comfort with these. They just don't weigh anything, there's never any weight on the cable, which is really light too. I mean, it's a shape that's worked for the other ones. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. What is new on the chassis of this one though, is that you can actually take the ear tips and notch them about halfway on. There's a little click that holds them in place, so you can have the ear tip either all the way pushed in or halfway pushed in. This extends the nozzle out a little bit, and this is how they're doing a dual tuning for this IEM. We'll talk about that more in sound. It does come with a carrying pouch, a soft one, not like the hard cases you get with the IE600 and 900. And the cable's nice. It's lightweight, it's braided, and I actually haven't had it tangle up in my pocket once, which is pretty great. So let's get into subjective sound first, and then we'll cover objective sound with frequency response after that. Like the rest of this lineup, the IE200 is pretty solid. The bass extension is very deep and textured. It has just a little bit of warmth in the very, very low ends of the mid-range. The middle of the mid-range, around like 800-ish hertz, is less emphasized, but definitely far from not being present. And the treble is really where this IEM, like many of the others in the line, shines. Well, outside of the stellar bass performance. The IE200 is a little bit softer in the treble than the IE600. Now, it's still definitely present. You get a lot of air, a lot of treble presence, but it's much smoother than the IE600 was. So if you really liked the IE600 but wanted a little bit less treble, well, the IE200 is basically exactly that, with a few small changes along the way. It is definitely a little bit less detailed than the IE600. There's just no way around that. And for something that is close to a quarter of the price, well, I find that impressive that it gets as far as it does. The soundstage is pretty good. I do like the soundstage on pretty much all of the Sennheiser IEMs. It doesn't quite have the space of the IE600, but again, it gets pretty close. Overall, the tone is slightly V-shaped with a smoothed top, but still with pretty solid timbre. Occasionally, I'll find a track where vocals could be a little bit thinner, but it's not very common. And when that does happen, it's more in comparison to another IEM like, say, the SA6 Ultra, which is also considerably more expensive than this. And also, I guess, not really available anywhere now. Actually, that one is closer to IE600 pricing. While it may not be as detailed as the IE600, it is still fantastic for its price. I definitely find this more detailed than things like the Moondrop Kato, and a little bit less focused on the lower parts of the treble and upper parts of the mid-range where we start to ramp into that ear gain. The Kato, while I loved it, I did find it a bit aggressive in that region, whereas the IE200, well, it's just a bit smoother. It lacks harshness, which is nice. And I feel like sound-wise, the IE200 starts to get you into that territory where you understand what Sennheiser's premium sound is all about. And I imagine after using this for a few years, people will get the itch to upgrade to Sennheiser's offerings like the IE600 or 900, which is a smart move on Sennheiser's part. This is like that taste that'll get you hooked. But, you know, aside from that, it really is something that I think is solid enough for a lot of people to use without upgrading. It's enjoyable right off my cell phone, it's enjoyable right off my laptop, and it's very enjoyable off of a good quality DAP. But I don't think you're shooting yourself in the foot if you're using it with like a Type-C or a Lightning dongle. My favorite listening experience with these so far was probably with the OWN M1S DAP using a balanced 2.5mm connector. And to conclude subjective sound before we move into frequency response, I would say that overall, the IE200 is like if you took something that is perfectly faithful to the original sound and added just a touch of excitement to it. It's that middle ground where you feel like it's still pretty accurate, but you can have fun, which is also why I've really enjoyed this for movies when I'm traveling. Okay, enough of my subjective takes. Let's talk about frequency response and do some comparisons to the IE600 as well. I've got a graph pulled up here on my laptop. These are raw measurements, and what we see here in red, well, this is the IE200's raw measurement. The green line is also IE200, but in its second position for the tip. So if you take the tip out to that second notch, you end up getting this response instead. A little more treble between 4K and 8K, and less response overall under 800 Hz, giving us kind of that flat mid-range and bass. Between these two, I did prefer it in the orientation that gives you more bass, the full-on default position. But it is nice having the option. Let's take away that second position and add in the IE600 for comparison. Now you can see the IE600 here overlaid. As you can tell, it has a lot more bass, but it also has a good bit more treble, especially in the 10 kHz area. Both of the IEMs are still a little bit V-shaped, but the IE600 is definitely more V-shaped out of the two. I still find this absolutely tolerable, but I'm also not a person who listens at extremely high volumes. In fact, I feel like the IE600 is better suited for medium to lower volume listening. Whereas the IE200, well, I feel comfortable turning it up a little bit more than I did the IE600. And looking at the frequency response, that makes sense. So let's wrap this thing up. In conclusion, well, the IE200 is pretty great. It's getting a strong recommendation from me, no surprise, because I own and love the IE600 already. I think this brings the great sound of that down to a more affordable price range with just a little bit taken off the top, and I have no doubt these will soon be in the pockets of audiophiles everywhere. So that is going to wrap up this video, guys. If you liked it, please leave a like down below, a comment letting me know what you want to see in the future. If you want to get active in the community, you can at the forums or Discord, both linked in the video description. And as always, don't forget to stick around, subscribe for more videos like this in the future. Until the next one, guys. Peace.